Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host Shwin Poo. In this episode 535, I am joined as always by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPen89 on Twitter. Stacy, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. Happy New Year.
Yes, happy Diwali to you too, Stacy, and to all those listening. Also, happy Diwali to you. Um, we're going to talk about the Knicks because finally basketball is close and we are all excited about basketball. And I would guess the large majority of our listeners are more excited about the upcoming basketball season than they are about their current football season. So we'll be talking about that. But before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. First, being that Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may watch this podcast. If you are and you have not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise which you can find on our website at www.thestrict.land. There's a link that will take you to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that get to access to Pod Circle's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from My Bizbozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord with the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, the pod that I host with YC, where we rant and rave about the next day more. You also get access to one of our premium articles, and you get access to Strickland NFL, which you guessed it is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Constantine Mechkos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening on our pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without our sponsor, FanDuel. FanDuel, anytime you have the urge to place a legal wager, FanDuel is there for you. Okay, let's get started. We will talk broadly about the Knicks' upcoming season, but some specifics that we need to get to before that. Mitchell Robinson and Josh Hart did not practice today being Monday afternoon to be specific. Josh Hart, we know what happened with him. He had back spasms pop up when in the Knicks' first preseason game in Abu Dhabi. He has not, I don't think he's practiced since then. And he hasn't played in a preseason game since then. So I don't expect to see him play on Wednesday, which is the season opener against the Cavs. Mitchell Robinson, a little bit more mysterious. He played the first 3 preseason games, then hasn't played since then, hasn't practiced since then. They keep calling it a load management thing. I find that a little bit suspicious because typically you don't want to load manage to the point the guy isn't practicing in the week leading up to the start of the regular season. So I my guess is that Mitch picked up some kind of knock. Uh, Not sure what it is. I don't want to speculate on what it is, but I think that he probably did pick up a knock, and I think that we'll get an injury designation on him. Maybe not until Wednesday prior to
He
game
is the
time, but
one
I
who
do think
knocks, Schwinn.
yes,
He is
he
the
is the
one
one
who
that does.
knocks. I was going to go with
Um,
that, or he's a bit nicked up. I don't know.
yeah,
Whichever one.
he's you think that of me? Um, so I don't know how to feel about. I know how to feel about this. Does it Is it unfortunate if Mitchell Robinson did pick up an injury and he's not ready to start the season? Yeah, obviously. Like he is, we've talked about this constantly, especially since he came back last year, where it's like he's just so obviously a major needle mover for this team, and I think he unlocks possibilities for this roster. That look, like, can a guy like Ariel Huckporty give you the ability to play double big and still have a rim runner and a rim protection guy next to Cat? Sure, but he's obviously not established at really any serious level, and certainly not anything close to what Mitchell Robinson we know, what Mitchell Robinson is capable of when he's healthy. So yeah, it's unfortunate if Mitch isn't healthy to start the year, and it sucks if he has to miss time. However long that period of time is, but and this can't. I don't think this can be overstated. all that matters to me about Mitchell Robinson is that this man is healthy and in the best condition he can possibly be when the playoffs roll around. I don't care how that happens. I don't know, and I don't care what sacrifices need to be made to ensure that or give us the best chance of that occurring. But whatever that is, that's what matters. So if he did pick up a knock and they're operating out of an abundance of caution, cool. If this is truly a work or a load management thing, fine, whatever. Like I don't care. And I also think that this medical staff deserves the benefit of the doubt given, you know, the success I would say they had last year in terms of, we saw the success the Knicks had in terms of managing various players' injuries, keeping guys healthy, all those type of things. So I'm not trying to downplay it. I just think that it's kind of a reality of Mitchell Robinson, right? He's an prone player. That's what he is. And it was never realistic to expect him to go through a full season healthy. Of course, again, yeah, I'd rather he start the season healthy than not, but it is what it is. I'm not. I mean, I don't know how to say it. Like, I guess it's weird to say I'm not that surprised because I feel like you should always expect some type of injury with Mitch, but um, it is what it is. And quite honestly, like, let's see what like now we're gonna learn pretty early on. I think this season if Mitch is out and misses some time, if Josh Hart misses some time, we're going to learn pretty early on about, a guy like Gershon Yabusele, what they think they added in him and how he plays with a guy like Karl Anthony Towns and whoever. We're going to learn about Ariel Hukporti because I guarantee you that he's going to have to play some minutes now, right? Like he's going to have to play. And I think we'll also learn, um, you know, just how good is the lineup of the main four starters plus Deuce McBride. I think we're going to learn a lot about these things very early in the season. And, you know, I think that's, I don't want to call it a silver lining because I always feel like anytime you say something's a silver lining, you're just talking about like, well, this thing that sucks happened, but maybe maybe we can learn something that doesn't suck from it. Um, but I do think there is a benefit to at least learning about these things early in the season, and getting and also like learning about Mike Brown, right? Like how does he operate when his preferences or he doesn't have a full deck? I think these are important things for us anyways as fans as we like kind of adjust to what to expect from a new coach because if this was Tom Thibodeau, I think we'd have a pretty clear we would kind of have an idea already of what how he's going to handle the rotation in these absences. So, I'm not going to say I'm excited about it, but I'm definitely intrigued to see what we learn, assuming again that these injuries or these are absences that will persist for at least a little bit into the start of this season.
Yeah, I mean, this is the reality with Mitch, right? I think I said if we can get 50 games, I'd be happy. When we did the over unders pod, um, I think you bring up good points, right? We'll get to you're kind of forced to use the McBride. You're gonna have to use McBride at some point with starters. That would be my preferred starting lineup. I understand going with Ariel Hukporti. Don't see it as much with Yabu, but you can argue that with Yabu you can go 5 out. Um, I think Deuce probably gives you more on defense, but I think Yabusele has been fine at the 4. He's not like a killer at the 4. I do think that front court then really you now have not great point of
Yeah,
attack defense because they don't want to use.
right.
And I'll add to that in a second, but you don't have great point of attack defense. You know what Bridges' shortcomings are there. And Brown himself said, we want to use him more off ball. And that's really, you have these two guys who are 14-foot combined wingspan, great size, great off ball instincts who can force turnovers for a team that wants to play fast. And then you have a guy who can heat up the ball and you can hide Brunson. At that point, you can make that 5 out work even without a rim protector. So I do think like if we talked about Hart, whether or not he's good to go for the beginning of the season, I would be starting Deuce. I don't know how that finger is going to affect his shooting, but that's still it was already a concern, right? And then, yeah, I think that this gives you the chance to see what you have in some of these depth pieces. I'm pretty confident in Hakordi. Nobody is Mitchell Robinson as an offensive rebounder and what that does for your offense. You mentioned before that there's still going to be some growing pains as they adjust to the new offensive system. They're not always going to be able to run up and down. They did play faster, but the overall pace was still towards the bottom, which I think is overstated. I think that there's better ways to look at it than just average pace. You could be a team that when you don't get into your offense,
Right.
especially this one, you're going to be fine playing it slower because you have two excellent shot makers who can bail you out. So I think I would agree with everything you said. I don't think it's worth overreacting without knowing how much. I remember last year, I think they had originally said like October, November, and then Mitch came back February, and then was under pretty heavy minutes restrictions. So this has always
Yeah, I mean
been
they never came outright and said that he had a minutes restriction, but like he didn't play back to backs, and they were pretty careful about not playing him much more than like 25 minutes max. Um, but yeah, like he was definitely managed last year pretty carefully.
and I think they had the same idea that you just said, right? What's most important is we have this guy able to play from April to ideally June, late June, or mid June, whenever it's going to end. So I think that's the like caution, caution, caution. I would expect the same thing if OG gets hurt too. By the way, that's I think something people haven't talked about. He gave us 70 something games last year. He's a guy who's had injury issues in the past, and it has submarined the Knicks. But I think that at the end of the day, even if Mitch plays 20 games like he did last year, this team can win 50 games. Probably a couple more this year because the East is so weak. Um, so it's not a concern. It allows you to build your depth to the point that you're talking about. I mean, sorry, I'm not going to say it's not a concern. It is. It does have some. It's not. It's not. Something that's going to wreck the season. This is still a team that should finish with the top 2 seed. If he misses significant time, maybe that bumps down to 3 or 4. Atlanta and Detroit get hot, or Orlando. But overall,
I'll throw this
overall,
to you. Like, let's just say, right? The Knicks have unfortunately get bad injury luck this year, right? So Mitch misses a bunch of time, which I think like even in the healthiest scenario for Mitch, right? Like, what did you say? You said you projected like you would have been happy with 50 games played or whatever. Like, I'm not projecting him to play more than like I think the best case scenario you're still talking about 55, 60 games, just because I don't think he's going to play back to backs anyway, um, and stuff like that. So let's just say like let's go with your 50, right? He plays 50 games, and OG plays 55, 60. Josh Hart misses, let's say 12, 15 games, whatever. So it's all these things, you get the short end of the stick on a lot of this stuff this year. Let's just go with that. And the Knicks end up as the 4 seed instead of the 1 or the 2, right? I mean, do you feel like that actually matters? Because I don't, and I don't say that to mean like, yes, I'd prefer to have home court, but I feel more confident. Like, I think if this team is healthy, I feel confident in them being able to beat any team in the East in a 7-game series with or without home court. Now, maybe that comes back to bite you if you get to the finals and maybe you play Denver, right? And because of the injuries, you don't have home court or you play whatever it is. Like maybe that comes back to bite you there. But in the Eastern Conference, I truly don't. I think the most paramount thing for this group is simply having their top 8 guys. If those guys are good to go in the postseason, I'm comfortable with that, and I think that ultimately is the bigger priority, bigger concern than seeding. Which I don't know if you agree with that or not, but like
I
yes,
think if it
again,
was
like
last year, I would have been a little bit more concerned, right? Because you would like to avoid Cleveland as much as possible, right? I know you're
right,
confident in beating them, but that is so if it was last year, right, we hadn't made the Eastern Conference Finals, right? Now it's no longer, well, we just want to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and if we lose in the second round because we got a tough draw, that's not great. It's like we're gonna have to play Cleveland most likely at some point, right? Um, I don't think there's a team capable of upsetting them besides the Knicks. So I would tend to agree with you there. It could also be a rough first round matchup, right? If you're the fourth seed and let's say it's Orlando and Atlanta at 3, you face a Detroit team that, even with all the coaching um, low hanging fruit that we've talked about, that team gave us a hard time. They have athletes to throw at Brunson. They're a tough defensive team. They play well at home. Actually, didn't we win both? We won both in Detroit, right? So maybe I'm overstating that.
We won all
But
three in Detroit.
yeah, we won all 3 in Detroit. So maybe I'm overstating that. But it could mean a much more. Whereas if you do get the 2 seed, you're maybe looking at Miami, which is, well, I know we're all traumatized from that, but you could end up with a weaker draw, right? So there's and that does play into health a little bit because if you go 6-7 games in a first round series and you have to play Mitch more to pull it out, or you have to play OG more to pull it out, those games where you're up by 25, 30 points and OG plays 25 minutes, that's a bonus too in terms of health. So I wouldn't completely underplay seeding, but if it's a choice between not having one of those guys healthy at the end of the season, especially the ones, I mean, you said top 8. I don't think Deuce has been super injury prone. I will ask you a follow up on this. Then you're talking about Hart, who he's had his injuries, but you're talking about Hart, OG, Mitch, and Cat, really, right? Are the guys that, and of course Brunson, but so far they've been able to navigate his absences. But those are the guys. That is, if it's the choice between the 4th seed and not having one of those guys close to 100% in the playoffs, then yeah, I think I would agree with you there. But I wouldn't say that it's a complete. It doesn't matter. Let me throw this back at you too. With Yabusele, he was listed at 283 pounds on the I think media day roster. Is that concerning to you at all?
I gotta be honest about this. No, I don't care about this, and the reason I don't care about this isn't because like it is irrelevant to me if um it's obviously relevant for the player to be in shape and well conditioned and whatnot. I don't know what Gershon Yabusele's ideal playing weight is. He's a big dude. He's always been a big dude. Um, Weight concerns with him are fair. I just don't know what his ideal playing weight is. And I also think it's worth mentioning he played in Eurobasket this year. Um, I assume that after he was done, he probably took some time off. So maybe he's a little bit behind in terms of where he should be or where you want him ideally. Um, but he doesn't strike me as a guy who doesn't care or like let's be real about this. He signed a pretty much a 1-year deal, right? It's a 2-year deal with a player option. So he has every reason to be motivated to put his best foot forward here. He did not lock in a long-term contract. And he just the way I've seen him kind of talk in interviews, some of the footage you got out of Eurobasket where he's like going off in the locker room at halftime, I think he cares. Like I think he genuinely cares. I think he wants to win. I think he's committed to the cause and all those nice things. All his teammates in Philadelphia said very, very nice things, glowing things about him. I think Maxey said something like he was like one of his favorite teammates ever or something. And like, sure, maybe some of that is just lip service, right? You're not going to necessarily badmouth the former teammate unless you're RJ Barrett. Um, but like, I guess I'm not that concerned because I trust the character of the player from everything I've read, everything I've seen, everything I've heard of him. Um, but I also would not dismiss anybody's concerns over that because obviously, again, like he's a big dude. So if you are concerned about the weight and think that's that's he's carrying too much or something right now, I think that's fair. Um, I haven't personally felt like he looks out of shape when I guess I'm trying to phrase this properly. I do think he looks a little bit not up to full speed, but I take that more as like I guess I'm not watching him and thinking, man, he looks bigger than he did last year or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I'm watching him and I think, okay, this looks like a guy who's still getting up to speed um, with a new team in a new system and who maybe is again like maybe couple of weeks behind where he would be ideally because he did play later into the summer and probably took some time off. Is that ideal in that case? No, it's not. Obviously, you would love if everybody comes in the season and they're 100%, raring to go. But I don't know that that's a cause for like, dooming over his condition or what this means long term for the season for him and any of those things. So, again, I totally understand if people are concerned, but I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet with a lot of things. Like I get being concerned, right, about Mitchell Robinson's health or Josh Hart's health or whatever, but I'm just not at the point where I'm like ready to lose my mind over it just because I think it's a long season and you know people say that, we say that, and then we lose sight of it as soon as the season starts. Like I think about how much shit you think of like over the course of a season, everything you go through, and it's just like if you start off a little slow, I don't know that that's a killer for you come April. You know what I mean? Like, because what we're really thinking about with this team is, are we in the best position that we can possibly be, and how do we get to that position for us to be in the best position we could possibly be in late April and hopefully into June. So, you know, is Yabusele a little heavier than he should be? Maybe. I just don't know that I have seen enough to feel confident in 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 saying that.
That's fair. I did want to bring up another point. So I know we don't typically comment on these kind of podcasts, and Matt Barnes can be a shit stirrer sometimes. But he said on a pod that Mike Brown is an extremely good person. His flaws have been that he's too nice, and in year one it works. With Sacramento. But he said when he coached Kobe and LeBron, those guys they would check in on their own, right? And they kind of walked all over him. This is a team where I think that, especially given what happened last year, maybe that's less of a risk. Brunson, we know, wants to stay in, um, and I think maybe that's less of a concern. But for example, we were talking last year about Hart says he doesn't want to come out of the game, and Tibbs was like, "All right, stay in." Those are some of the things you would want Brown to maybe be a little bit of a more forceful hand. So I know like it's Matt Barnes, it's just a player talking, and he's on a pod. But I don't think it seems like that, and maybe that is part of just the reality of coaching guys like LeBron and Kobe, where generational players obviously are going to have their way, right? I mean, LeBron literally has his son still signed, and they cut a pretty decent player in RJ Davis, um, who many would have expected just on talent alone to be in over Bronny. So maybe that's just a tough sample. Sacramento, it looks like there was more going on, but I'm curious if you know is that too nice thing, and players maybe don't respect him, a risk with Mike Brown, or players stop respecting him maybe after a year or two if he's not holding the stars accountable, which is something we talked about last year as an issue.
I'm going to be completely honest about this. I don't think we should give anything that fucking Matt Barnes says oxygen or attention or anything. Like he is seemingly like he just kind of comes across like a fucking scumbag, and I don't
Are
like
you saying
him.
he's fishing for a good soundbite?
I think he
Fishing.
just says whatever and there's no repercussions for it because he has a fucking podcast with Steven Jackson and they both say some of the most inane fucking stupid bullshit you can fucking say. But hey, they played in the league and they're tough guys or whatever. Matt Barnes was so tough because one time he pretended to throw the ball at Kobe Bryant's face. He was so fucking tough, dude. Just ask Matt Barnes how tough he was. Um, I also just think, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's true, guys tune him out, but like right before he got fired in Sacramento, he had an entire thing where he basically called De'Aaron Fox out for fucking up an endgame defensive coverage. And I don't know that that is the best way to go about things. But when you're talking about accountability and stuff like that, I don't really buy that Mike Brown doesn't hold people accountable, or at least try to hold people accountable. Now, maybe his messaging doesn't come across and guys tune him out after a while. I don't have a strong feeling about that one way or the other based on what I've seen of him as a coach. Um, I don't really know that that's what went wrong for him in Cleveland the first time. I don't know that that's really what went wrong with him, in Sacramento. I don't really give a shit about Matt Barnes' experience with the Lakers, because I feel like he's trying to make himself seem like a much more central figure to what happened in LA, versus like, yeah, dude, you were Landry Shamet. Congratulations. Um, and look, if people tune him out in year 3 or whatever, fine. Maybe that'll suck and we'll have to deal with that then. Let's hope year 1's great, and like then we don't have to worry about any of this shit. I don't know. I find that entire thing. I didn't listen to the clip. I saw it going around. I saw some of the stuff that was, written out, his quotes. Um but yeah, if you're gonna ask me that question, I would just say, like, I don't really give a shit what Matt Barnes says about pretty much anything. I think it's probably safe to say, yeah, pretty much nothing. I don't care about Matt Barnes' thoughts about anything. Um, Once a Nick, always a Nick, I guess, for him. He had a nice, great 20-game stretch with the Knicks. Okay, moving forward. All right, so the NBA season, it is starting very soon. Starting tomorrow, actually. As we're recording this on Monday, the first game of the season is tomorrow, Tuesday. The Knicks obviously are very well into a season. Are they're looking ahead to a season where all of the expectations that have been building for this group, to win a title, at least push for a title, are squarely now on their shoulders, and they're going to have to deal with that. Again, on FanDuel, the Knicks are the 4th favorite in the league for the title. They're at plus 1,200. They are also plus 370 on the season. Again, on FanDuel to win the East, second favorites in the East. But we have a long way to go. So I'm going to ask you some questions. And my first question for you is, do you think that Jalen Brunson being off the ball more, 1, will be good for him, 2, will be good for the group, and 3, do the Knicks ultimately actually have the personnel for that to be effective against the best teams in the league who you will need to beat to win a championship?
Is it good for Jalen Brunson? I would say unequivocally yes. We've seen him get more off-ball chances. We saw what happened when they lost Randall. DJ from Knicks Film School has made this point a lot. This is a guy who was consistently hitting about 47% of his catch and shoot threes. That volume went down tremendously. He is a very good pull-up three-point shooter, but those obviously don't have the same level of efficiency. And we talked about this. You want to get everyone to April. That damn sure includes Jalen Brunson. Not that he's injury prone, but if he's constantly having to bring the ball up, constantly dealing with the best players and having to create, that is taxing, right? For 82 games. And we have seen him have injuries here and there because they're asking a ton out of him. So the more that they can get him off ball, I think that that will be good for him. I think it'll preserve him a little bit better. It'll allow him to pick his spots a little bit better. It'll allow him to find better matchups. Even when you want him to get back on the ball, he can now hunt for a favorable situation where he's catching the ball on the move. And if you're already behind Jalen Brunson, you're cooked. We saw even Osar Thompson, maybe one of the top athletes in the league, could not recover when he got shook by Brunson. So I think for him, it's very good. Your second question is it good for the Knicks, right?
Yes.
Second question is good for the Knicks. I would say yes. There's a few reasons I would say that. Number one, we have seen that Bridges is, when asked to do so much on defense, his effort can wax and wane if he's not getting the kind of touches he'd want, right? He fades a little on offense. In preseason, we've seen him be more aggressive. I think everyone remembers that fadeaway at the end of a game. Was it the Pacers game, game 3, where he had
Uh,
basically a dunk, but he faded away on the fast break?
was it Bridges you're talking about?
Yeah,
I think. I mean, it's sad to say this, but
you got to be
it
more
could have been in
specific.
many games last year.
Right. So I saw him go to the hole with some force. Again, baby steps. I'm not saying, and it's totally fair for people to say that's not good just if you don't like Tibbs or you're not happy with your role. Your effort still has to be there. I do think he'll be a guy who'll be more energized with more ability to do stuff on ball. I'm not talking about Brooklyn Bridges. I'm talking about getting him more opportunities. I think using Cat creatively can unlock things that we maybe didn't see. Um, when they went 5 out last year, we saw Cat throw some really beautiful passes from the top of the key. He's not quite as good of a passer out of doubles from the low post. But again, moving Brunson off ball allows you to use them together in creative ways. You can use more DHOs. You can open things up for cutters because now defenses have to worry about Brunson. I mean, think about that, right? You're talking about maybe he doesn't have the gravity of Steph, but that's the kind of effect. If a guy is running around, you can't leave him for a second. It opens things up in a much more dynamic way than just, okay, I can collapse the defense and kick out to you for 3. Guys are moving more. So I think it'll be good for the team. I think your third question is the best one because against great teams, if you're moving Brunson off ball, you do need one of the other guys to be able to consistently be counted on to create. And we frankly haven't seen that at a high level. We saw Bridges do that in Brooklyn for like half a season. Obviously, wasn't a very serious team trying to contend. We've seen Cat be able to create for himself, and at times be able to create for others. But he's not really an off the dribble shot creator, right? His drives are very line drive. He doesn't pass out of drives. He can pass out of the post, but that often leads in turnovers. He's a very good scorer, but even compared to Randall, maybe not as much of a shot creator. I am encouraged by what I saw Brown do with Sabonis. I think Sabonis is better ball handler, a little bit more shifty, maybe has better vision than Cat. But
I
that's
think the the main thing I actually think is the difference between Cat and Sabonis is Sabonis is just like one of these bigs who just has a really good, people what do people call him, right? His assist hunting is like, oh, he's a DHO merchant. And like I get that because it's kind of funny and it's true. But like there is a real skill to being good at like screening on
anticipating.
DHOs and like handing it off and creating that separation for the ball handler. And he is really good at that. Um Cat is not as good at that. He's not as good with the sleight of hand and you kind of have to be good at getting away with setting illegal screens. Basically, like that's ultimately what it means to be a really good DHO player. Um, Draymond is another example of this.
Bam.
Horford, yeah, Bam. These guys are all like really good at setting illegal screens in a way that refs are not going to consistently call them on fouls for. I don't know that Cat has that in him, which is why I think there's less separation you're getting out of those plays. I also would suspect that this is an adjustment for him too. He's not typically been used in this fashion in his career, and um, it's going to take him time. He had an interesting answer today when he was asked about kind of like what he thinks his potential is in Mike Brown's system and role, and he was kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how to answer it. It was not the greatest answer you want to hear. I'm also not I'm not ringing alarm bells yet. Let's put it that way. Ultimately, we'll see. The proof will be on the court, right? What he says in a press conference doesn't really matter to me, at least not as far as that is concerned. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to jump in there to say that because I do think that is actually what the main difference is more than anything else.
Maybe. I also think like Cat's ball handling Like he can put the ball on the floor, but it's a straight line, right? I think Sabonis probably gives you a little bit more, although they're both kind of straight line drivers. But there's questions there. We've seen Deuce. We know what he is. Not going to be able to move Brunson off ball too much, unless he's bringing the ball up, which I think he showed he was at least competent at the end of the year. So you can at least start Brunson coming off and getting a handoff. Or Shax has done a great job of breaking down some of the sets the Knicks have been running, which I highly recommend people look at. Yabu maybe gives you a little bit of some of the Hartenstein type stuff. He's a fun to stretch big, but he's probably not going to play more than 20 minutes conservatively in the playoffs. So I think my answer to your third question is it remains to be seen. I think this roster has the capabilities. I don't think you can up Clarkson, Brunson. Clarkson might be the best shot creator, and from that, perimeter standpoint, he hasn't looked like it, and in the preseason, and I don't know if you can play him heavy minutes with Brunson in the playoffs. So that remains to be seen. And the reality might be it helps them win a lot of games. It helps them attack some lineups where Bridges might have a mismatch or Cat has a mismatch. But probably, yeah, this team is going to be relying on Jalen Brunson to make magic happen late in games against the best teams.
Yeah. I'm like kind of unsure how I feel about all this. I think the idea, right, of we want to get Brunson off ball more is good and the right thing to do and needed to be done. Like we talked about that last year a bunch, and that was like I thought a very reasonable criticism of Tibbs was just having so much of everything you did offensively be dependent on Brunson creating on ball. And so giving other guys, Cat, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, whoever, more responsibility offensively,
I'm not
it
calling
needed
for
to happen.
more OG creation, by the way. You might be, but I'm
Yeah,
thinking
I mean,
McKellen. I
when
don't
I'm
want to
talking
see
about
him.
when I'm talking about creation, though, I just mean the idea of like you're actually involving these guys intentionally in what you're trying to achieve offensively. Whereas last year it felt like Mikal and OG very specifically, it was a lot of just like space the floor, just like stand around the perimeter, space it out for us. And when Jalen passes you the ball, you know, you can shoot or you can attack the closeout. But it was not intentional. I didn't think it was designed for them or that there was much of a focus on getting them involved in ways like, using them as screeners or something like that. Like I didn't see much of that at all. So I think all of that, just being a little more creative and willing to push the envelope for these various players is good and was a necessary change from last year. I also feel that there are some things that I'm a little bit not as uh I'm not sure what the value of, let's just say, we've seen Mitchell Robinson when he plays, he's more involved in terms of like, you know, going out and running a DHO at the top of the key or at the elbow or whatever, and I'm not really sure that has value. That feels a little bit like, quite honestly, it feels a little bit of like, this is the system, like we play this way, and so my five needs to be able to do this thing. And like, while I think Mitch may be able to do more than he ever did on the ball a little bit as a creator, or not even as a creator, but just like, in terms of operating a dribble handoff, maybe you can do more of that than we saw under Tibbs. I just don't know that you want to go too much into like having that be something that happens quite frequently because he is limited in what he can do. So I think there needs to be some give and take from as far as like what Mike Brown wants and versus what is ideal given the roster composition. And I do think that will be an adjustment because while I do want Brunson to be on the ball less, and I do want other guys like Bridges and Cat to be able to do more offensively, I also think realistically, Brunson is the one guy though that you feel very confident in as far as this guy can consistently get into the paint, draw defenders, and, you know, create advantages for others I don't think that Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns are capable of doing that consistently. And even if you put them in better positions within what you're doing as um within like your offensive setup principles, scheme, whatever you want to call it, um I still think like this team will it's not they don't have the personnel to have Brunson be off ball as much as say like Indiana has Tyrese Halliburton off ball, right? Like I don't think they have the personnel for that. Even if they implemented everything Indiana does, I still think this team would be more reliant on Brunson to create than a team like Indiana because they just don't have the ball handling overall that Indiana has, for example. Um, and I don't know that I think Mike Brown is smart enough to figure that out. But part of figuring that out is kind of pushing the boundaries of what guys are capable of. So I think there might be stuff in like the first 20, 25, 30 games or whatever where maybe we're annoyed because there's like a little bit too much of like Mikal Bridges on ball or, you know, Mitchell Robinson running DHOs at the top of at the top of the key, or whatever. We can go on and on. She's just listing a couple of examples, but that is to me part of Mike Brown also just learning what this team is capable of and understanding the kind of limits of the players he has at his disposal. Um, so I'm like very interested to kind of see what it ultimately looks like to say we're gonna get Jalen Brunson off the ball more because I don't know what is the optimal amount of Jalen Brunson off ball versus Jalen Brunson on ball.
Yeah, I mean, it also, if you are playing faster, if you have more window dressing, and if you don't have the same guy having the ball, it should make everyone tougher to guard, right? So, we talk about Bridges not being the best decision maker, but if there's window dressing and if you have this movement and you have defenses reacting it, those windows might be wider than they were last year, right? We talk about Cat, not being able to pass off the dribble. That would be my biggest concern with having him handle a heavy load. But unlike Sabonis, he also has insane gravity. And if he's running a DHO with Brunson, and if they send two defenders or if they shade towards that, he could pull it back and step and take a shot, right? So that I think there's still ways that using Brunson more creatively should make it easier for those guys to actually create on their own because they're playing next to not just a high gravity guy, but a guy who ideally now is not just going to be standing to space, but is going to be moving, cutting himself, and confusing defenses more. So that's what I would add there. It'll be interesting to see. I think it'll work better in the regular season. I think in the playoffs you have more half court, you have teams more locked into your tendencies, and we've seen Cat can get away with some of his tendencies being caught because he's an insane shooter and shot maker. It's a little bit tougher for Bridges, who ends up becoming much more mid-range heavy, and will probably struggle even more to get to the rim. But I think in the regular season it should be good. In the postseason, yeah, you probably are looking a lot more at having to figure out ways to get Brunson open. But I will say, if he's starting off ball more, if they're having Bridges bring it up, if they're playing with more pace, if they're getting out in transition more, you know, that mitigates some of that.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that is true. What see, it's like it's interesting because I agree with everything you're saying, but I also think like, and this is where I am. This is why I thought, when we did the over unders, I picked the Knicks under, um, and one of the reasons is I think that everything you're saying is correct, but I also wonder if like what the Kings, I don't remember what they played at, but they were like in a very high paced team, when they were at their best under Mike Brown. The goal of playing faster is very good. and it needs to happen. I also wonder, like, there is an ideal pace for your group. Like, this team, this Knicks roster is not blessed with like the greatest athletes in the NBA. Um, they are not imbued with like amazing depth that you would feel comfortable kind of maxing guys out and maybe playing them shorter minutes, right? So, oh, okay, well, we can play this guy 30 minutes. Brunson only needs to play 30 minutes because we're so deep. I don't know that we have a roster like that. So I kind of wonder what is the actual optimal pace for this group? And also, an adjustment for this team is getting used to playing at that pace because shooting threes, right? Like again, I've talked about this a lot because I think this is true. Shooting a high clip is obviously what you want. Shooting a great percentage on that volume is also what you want. Being able to shoot, maintaining your percentage when you're playing faster, um, and your diet of threes is maybe different, right? Whereas last year you're getting a lot of catch and shoot, spot up looks, a lot that made up a lot of your volume of 3-point shooting last year in the half court. This year, maybe you're getting, let's say, I think the Knicks averaged something like 34 threes per game last year. Let's say you're getting 41 instead. Okay, well, how are you getting those 7 more threes? Maybe they're like ones that you're walking into or even running into in transition. Maybe they're ones that they're ones where you're a little bit more in movement and you're not set. And I just wonder about kind of like where does the actual optimal level of all this stuff fall? And it's why I think they will need some time as a group. The players, Mike Brown as a coach, will need to they need to see it play out for a little while, feel it out, and figure out what is best for us as a group. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like I explained that properly.
Yeah, it's gonna be they're gonna have to iterate, right? So, it's like, all right, maybe and they'll have to get used to it, right? If these are new shots, if Cat, I mean, like, I think they should find it pretty easy to just get simple stuff like Cat trailer threes that we know he can take, Brunson trailer threes that we know he can take. For all the lack of great athletes, I do think Bridges, well, especially OG, they've been pretty good at getting out in transition. Um, so you know, I don't worry about. I do think there will be growing pains, like you said, and some of those things. It's like, all right, is a movement three for Mikal 30 games in the season? If he's shooting 32% on those, all right, maybe let's dial it back, or maybe it's a question of just finding the better spots, and they'll have to iterate a bit. I'm a little less concerned with some of those things than you though. So, like as far as costing them a bunch of wins, because I think they're still going to be able to win on talent most nights.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Um, so moving on, where are you as far as like what are you expecting to see? What are your expectations for Mikal Bridges this year? And I don't think either of us thought he had a bad season last year, but I would say that I felt. I mean, I was underwhelmed, although I expected to be underwhelmed for the player he is because of the cost of getting him. So I think like when you factor in the acquisition price, majority of fans would say they were underwhelmed um, by his performance last year. Do you think that do you think that he can change that kind of view of him this season? Do you expect him to? And I guess do you think that like do you actually believe that Mike Brown can maybe get him to hit a higher level um as a player? Because he's a player who's never made an all-star team. Like, do you think that there's more to expect from him in terms of just elevating his game?
I think I forgot what pod it was. I don't know if it was Knicks Fan TV, but Alan Hahn was saying the Knicks are very high on Bridges. I think he said all-star expectation. I don't know if I'm there. I think his offense was up and down. He still did finish the year shooting 35%. If he gets that back up to 37, especially if they're getting more, more shots in transition. If you can get him more corner threes, if he gets back to what he was above the break, I think you're feeling pretty good. Maybe he took I think what 5.5 attempts per game last year. He was at 7.5 in Brooklyn. Split the difference because he's no longer the same kind of responsibility, and I think I'd be happy with that. And then yeah, like he took. Let's see. I mean, obviously the most frustrating thing on offense was the complete allergy to the rim. I'm seeing 19% of field goals from 3 feet from 3 feet of the rim. I'm assuming that's very skewed by transition, but being willing to attack the rim more. Free throw rate was abysmal for most of the year. Yeah, free throw rate was 10%. For his career, he's at 21. The year before in Brooklyn, he was at 25. He's gotten paid now. Shouldn't have to worry as much about getting hurt. So I would like to see him get to the line more. But offense. These are all. He was still an effective player, right? League average true shooting, almost 18 points a game, almost 4 assists, and like more than a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. That's not bad, right? But I think you mentioned this a lot, playing with more force, one. And I think the reads are what they are. He's never going to be the best passer. But I think all of those things are on the table. Just incremental improvement on offense, fine. I think where I was more disappointed was the defense, right? And partly it was how he was being used, right? Asked to run through a million screens. Part of it was, not getting involved in the glass, right? He was, in the preseason, he was getting involved on the offensive glass. For his size, again, he averaged 4.5 rebounds a game, over 82 in Brooklyn, 3.2 last year. So, for a team that often did crash the glass, maybe he's your first guy back in transition. You'd like to see him play with more force on both ends. I think it'll help if they do play Deuce a lot more with him, and he can play off ball with OG, and they can play more like a free safety or a great help defender. Then his 2 biggest plays really came off ball in the playoffs to seal those Boston games. I think that's what I'd be expecting. I don't think we're going to see some creation leap that would portend an all-star. I don't think we need to for this team to be. We just need to have him take on a little more usage, get to the free throw line and the rim a bit more like he has for the majority of his career, and then tick up on threes. And I'd be happy with that. And then, yeah, if he's both used and he's better when he is used point of attack and navigating over screens because not worn down, staying with quicker ball handlers. Not an all-star, but it's a top 50 player to me. Probably higher than that.
Yeah, I think it's always hard to do this. Ultimately, the goal is to maximize the sum of your parts. And it was weird watching the Knicks in a lot of ways last year because you were like, okay, Brunson's having an all NBA season. Cat's having an all NBA season. Josh Hart was in a lot, like he had a career season offensively, individually. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges had good seasons individually, and yet you're watching the team and it was just like it never felt greater than the sum of their parts, right? Even in the playoffs, like yes, you beat Detroit. Coming out of that series, you've kind of felt like, okay, well, they won, but it felt like a lot of individual stretches of brilliance from Brunson and Cat bailed you out, and some nice contributions at various points from Mikal and Josh and even Campaign or whatever. You watch the Celtics series, and it's like, honestly, the takeaway from the first 2 games was kind of like, how the fuck are we up 2-0? Like, what the hell did we just watch? And it just never felt like the group was operating at a high level collectively, but to your point, like there is talent there, so that talent can overcome that hey, we're not working great as a group, but you know what, Brunson's got it going today, so it doesn't really matter because he can get us 45 tonight and that'll be enough. um And I think, a good example, and it's kind of weird to use them as an example given how they didn't actually do anything last year in the playoffs greater than they had already achieved. But you kind of saw this to Cleveland, where the year before, they lose in the second round to the Celtics in 5 games after a 7-game series in the first round against Orlando. And it kind of just felt like this group it's maxed out with what they are. And they're good, but they're definitely not good enough. And we know what the ceiling of this team is. And obviously, last year they win whatever it was, 64 games and get the 1 seed in the East. And they're, the team is playing at such a high level. And sure, you get to the playoffs and they ultimately collapse against the Pacers. I do think the injury stuff with them in that series has been kind of dismissed as a factor. And I don't think that's right. But the point is, like, I think sometimes you can assume that this is what a group is capable of, and that's that. And it just takes somebody else coming in and kind of reimagining things, tinkering with things, changing maybe a few things that are part of the operation, and all of a sudden the collective hits a higher level. And I do think there's that potential for this team. And I think they will get there. I think they will hit a higher level offensively in terms of their process under Mike Brown. I feel very confident in that, actually. I'm just more of the opinion that it'll take more time earlier in the season than you do. But also to the point you made, which is fair, is like, even if I'm right, there is a lot of talent here. And while they're kind of getting their shit together as a group, that individual talent can still win them games in the meantime. Um, and I think that's fair. And I think that's, it's definitely on the table. So yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see how that works out. As far as uh, you know, we've talked a lot about Bridges and Brunson and Cat, and I kind of feel like we know what the expectations are for those guys. Um, what like what are you expecting from Gershon Yabusele? Because he was the Knicks' biggest addition in this offseason. They were obviously limited in what they were able to add to the roster, but they did go ahead and added Gershon Yabusele. What do you think of him predominantly being used as a forward this season? Uh, do you feel like that is his best position? And I guess, what are you expecting from him? What impact are you expecting from him? And are you encouraged by what you've seen so far, or are you kind of like, I don't know?
Yeah, I'll admit I haven't watched enough to get the best um, the best idea. From what I've seen throughout his career, he's a high motor guy, right? He's struggled on defense, particularly the center position. I don't think that's from a lack of effort, right? He's just undersized for center. Um, you know, but he's a pretty good athlete with some great physical tools. He's just a year removed from shooting 38% from three. The volume wasn't that high, but I would expect him to carry that over. And I would expect him to carry that over and be able to scale up and not lose too much efficiency. Especially given, last year Philadelphia was kind of a shit show. Um, and it's not like he was a corner three merchant. Only 24% of his attempts came from there. He shot 36%, actually shot a little bit better above the break. So I think, he had 44 dunks a couple years ago. So obviously gives you some transition ability. I think he's a guy who can be a little bit of, he can do some Josh Hart things, I think, where he can impose his will a little bit on the glass. Not quite Josh Hart, but he's got some size. Pretty good offensive rebounder. He can push the ball, I think, in transition and can handle well enough to do that. Out of DHOs and for simple reads, he throws some nice passes. I think he'll be a fun offensive player. I see some things that the Knicks did with Hartenstein that they might be able to do with him in terms of dribble handoffs. He can help that bench unit, right? Particularly, we've talked about right now that Brogdon retired. If the backcourt is just going to be Clarkson and Deuce, you don't have much creation for others there. So Yabusele, whether they bring Cat off the have Cat babysit the bench or Bridges, he can make life things easier as a kind of hub there. And I expect that to be a big focus of this offense between Cat, Yabusele, and even Porty at times. I don't think I do think, especially if Mitch is being load managed, he'll get some minutes at the five. You know, he's played it and shown that he can do it. It's probably not going to be his primary position, but there's going to be games where it's a worthwhile move. And I think we'll see. We're still figuring out what Brown's going to do. Can he push those buttons? But I don't think I don't think it's the kind of option that's just off the table. So I'm pretty excited. Like I said, I think he's a high motor guy who's going to fit in and bring some energy to the team. He's not. I guess the closest comp maybe that they've had in recent years is Obi. He's not a high flyer like that, right? But a smart player with some size who can get into transition. His defensive limitations, but if you can work around him, he can give you 18, 20 solid minutes that move the needle in a playoff game.
Yeah. I'm very interested in Yabusele. I think his transition is going to take a little bit. I actually can imagine it being a little bit like Hartenstein's, where for the first 20 games you're like, what the fuck is this guy and why the fuck did we sign him? But I feel a lot of that is because he is when I watch him again, I'm not going to pretend like I sat there and watched a shit ton of him in Philly last year, or that I've watched all of his France games or whatever. But he actually strikes me as like quite a cerebral player offensively. Like, I think he is a guy who, once he understands his teammates, understands his role, understands what's being asked of him and what his responsibilities are, um, can really, really excel in doing those things. But I also feel that he is not he's not like an instinctively great player. It was just I don't know if that's like, and what I mean by that is if I drop OG Anunoby into any team, he's going to be able to do a certain level of stuff that is just very translatable no
We saw it
matter.
here, right? His first game, there was a huge impact already, right? So
Right.
as a
And
net
I
type of guy.
don't right. And I think Yabusele is a guy where not only do I think he needs to get used to his teammates and get used to what, where he's supposed to be on the floor, what his, roles are, what are his reads, all those things. And also just like in terms of, I think he needs to get comfortable with that role, in the sense of like there were times in the preseason you could tell where he'd miss a three and maybe like the next possession down, he has another open look at a three and he kind of hesitates on it. And I think it'll take him some time to just get comfortable being like feeling comfortable to, just have the confidence to like kind of keep shooting and not feel like, well, I missed the last one and I'm on the floor here with like Brunson and Cat or whoever, so maybe I shouldn't take this one. I think it'll maybe take him some time there. But on top of that, I also think it's a matter of teammates getting comfortable with him and understanding what he's capable of, what his tendencies are, what his habits are, what he's good at, what he's not good at. Like, I think he's quite good as a dribble handoff guy, as a hub for that. And I think but I think there's a growth process of understanding how he should play off of a guy like Brunson and how Brunson can play off of him and can benefit off of that, for example. So I imagine that that will take a little bit of time. And, you know, but all that being said, I am pretty optimistic about him because I think that like DHO stuff very specifically, I don't know. They flat out did not have a big that could do those things last year on the team. Like, I think Cat can do more than he did, obviously. Um, but to me, he's just not a big that I personally feel is going to be comfortable running a shit ton of DHOs in terms of like volume, the way Sabonis was. And obviously, I don't even think Yabusele is going to be comfortable doing it at that volume either. But I do think he'll be more comfortable and more effective in those positions. As far as just like obviously Cat as a threat, right? Just because he's such a great shooter and he's so talented offensively, he's always going to have a larger impact. But in terms of just the actual execution of certain actions, right? Like DHOs or whatever you want to, there can be a variety of things we're talking about. Pick and pops, for example, even. Um, I think those are actions where over the course of the season, as he gets more comfortable and as his teammates get more comfortable with him, that you'll start getting more from him. And I am pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's fair. I think. I mean, well, JJ Redick said he's not going to let Cat pick and pop anyway. So,
And that's all. That's all. That's as soon as you say it, it's as simple as that.
um, yeah, and I mean, he's. I think it helps to play with a good ball handler. So, he benefited from playing with Tyrese Maxey. Brunson has that kind of pull up shooting ability. Um, and they were kind of missing a guy like this off the bench who could really energize and juice the team. Right, Shamit played hard, but doesn't have that kind of force. Most of the season, they really had a short rotation. Deuce, we know what he can do, but it's not that it's a big transition guy um, who can do a bunch of things, who can impose his will a little bit physically. They just didn't have that guy for most of the last season coming off the bench. Hart used to be that guy, um, and if and when he comes back, now he can get back to that role, and that leads me to this, right? When fully healthy, right? I would imagine this team's bench is something like um, so Clarkson, let's assume Mitch starts. Clarkson, Deuce, Hart, Yabusele. I would imagine Cat or one of the starters. You could also add Porty. That bench is secretly a lot better than last year. Like Brunson, Hart, and Yabu, I think are all plus bench players. Obviously, if you have Mitch coming off the bench and Deuce starting, even more so. Um, do you feel like a lot of the depth concerns that we had last year have been alleviated? And how much is Yabu on his own just kind of doing that?
Um, at full strength, I would say that some of the depth concerns are I feel better about. Uh, but I think there's still a lot of question marks. Like I'm gonna be honest, like I've not been extremely encouraged by what I've seen from Jordan Clarkson or what I saw of Jordan Clarkson in preseason. So is he really an upgrade on campaign? Like in theory, yes. Like in theory, very much a guy that can score the way that Clarkson can score off the bench is a huge he could be a huge benefit to the Knicks and something they sorely lacked last season, right? We talked about that all the time where it's like, they just had no scoring pop off the bench, no creation off the bench. And I think obviously that Clarkson up with that. But, just because you can do more shit doesn't mean that that's actually good if you're not good at doing the shit that you're doing more of. And yeah, it's great that Clarkson can handle the ball and create shots, but like if he's not hitting them at a high enough clip, and if he's taking touches away from somebody else, and turning the ball over and blah blah blah, yeah, maybe that's not the upgrade that you hoped for. Um, I do feel very strongly that if Josh Hart is a full time off the bench player, that is a massive benefit to him. I think that's a massive benefit to the team. I think it's a massive benefit to the bench because there's something to the way I think that he can change the tempo and feel of a game off the bench that never existed last year when he was a starter. And that's part of the reason why, when when I mentioned earlier that we were less than the sum of our parts last year, that was part of it because it's like Josh Hart is having an awesome year, yet it feels like this group is missing, like they're not gelling in the way that it would feel like they should gel given the production. And I think that production off the bench can really change the feel of things for the Knicks. Um, so I that is something that I feel like they may very much benefit from when once he's back on the floor. Um, I will also come back to you with this. Well, but to your point, like I do like I think what Yabu can bring them, um, you know, can Jordan Clarkson be in reality what we want him, like the theoretical version that we want from him? That would be awesome. If those things happen, I don't think there's a question that the Knicks depth is in a better space. You also talk about a guy like Ariel Hukporti. Like, I liked what I saw of him in preseason, very encouraged by it. Even a guy like Trey Jemison, who might actually get minutes now because of this, with Mitchell Robinson's injury stuff. Like, I liked what I saw from him in preseason. I like that he's like a legitimate vertical lob threat. All those things are fine. Like, I feel better about that than, honestly, than Precious. Like, because while I was bullish about Precious coming into the season, I feel like that dissipated quite fast. So maybe I'll have the same kind of maybe that's exactly how it would work with Trey Jemison if he starts getting away like a lot of minutes or plays as much as Precious did last year. But to bring it back to, I think Huck Porty, I am bullish on him. I'm excited for him. I'm kind of very excited to see what he can do, honestly. Um, Trying to be cautious with my optimism. I also feel like Diawara, look, he started the last game of preseason. Mike Brown said that was to reward him for basically playing well in practice, trying hard in practice. Um, that may be true. And I guess I'm very interested to see if he gets a legitimate chance in the regular season. I think he might. I really think he might. I think Mike Brown likes him. I think he likes the length. I think he likes the defensive intensity, the physicality he plays with, the fact that he gets contested rebounds, all those things. I think he likes that. I think he wants to have another wing. Um, and I think it's also telling the stuff that he said about Pacome Dadier as far as like what he wanted more of from him. When you compare that to Diawara. I'm not talking about Diawara is going to, make himself into an everyday rotation player, but I do think he's going to get chances. And maybe if he takes his chances, maybe that is what happens. So I do like the depth better. I do think they have more intriguing kind of, or they're 12th, 13th, 14th guys. I think those guys are better positioned to maybe help the team on the floor this year than the guys that were in those roles last year. Um, but I guess where I would come, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. We talked, obviously, we've all talked a lot about what will the next starting lineup be, what would be the best use of the lineup. Um, it seems like Mike Brown had decided that the best version, the best lineup for him was going to be involving starting Mitch. Mitch is out now. Um, so, or he might be out now. I don't want to assume anything. He might be out now. Do you feel like this is basically the reason why starting Mitch is probably not the best idea because he is going to miss time so frequently that it feels like you're setting yourself up to just have to constantly shuffle things in a massive way for 48 minutes. Whereas if you bring him off the bench, it's a little bit more straightforward.
I mean, I think if you're playing a lot of lineups together, I don't know how much it matters if there's some changes in the starting lineup, especially if you have one standard look you go to without Mitch, right? I would imagine Huck Porty has a real shot at starting. We'll see what Brown does, assuming Mitch doesn't play. I think that's a fair point. I also think if you're in the playoffs, I'm still. I think there's a fair argument that Deuce would have been the better option against Indiana because he could handle the point of attack, and everyone else on the Knicks struggled with that, right? So there's an argument against the Pacers, but we're not going to play the Pacers this year. The team we have to beat goes double big, so that's one concern. And two, there's also the fact that we saw that teams will go to Hack-a-Shack, and even if they don't, the later you bring Mitch in, the higher the chances are that you're already in the penalty. So if he's and so you can get the most out of that if you actually play him the first 6 minutes, right? And let him rack up fouls on their team, and then have Brunson and Cat just feast off of it. So I don't know how much the content, the lack thereof matters. In terms of like, oh, if you're shuffling around the lineup a lot, I think in reality we want all of these guys to play a lot in different lineups. I think to your point about Diawara, I also think we're going to. I hope is we saw like Rick Carlisle would not play Jarris Walker for 2 games and then throw him in, right? Or he would not play. He didn't play Benedict Mathurin. I think the first game he throws him in heavy minutes, right? So I think that like I'm hoping that the whole situational, meaning this person is never going to play unless there's emergency injuries. Diawara might be the kind of guy who breaks that, and maybe Dadier too. But like for the reasons that I think it makes sense not to start Mitch are that you have an issue a little bit maybe with depth. Um, you probably want Cat to play with the bench unit to bail them out. Do you make Cat the first sub out? Then you're playing Mitch maybe 12 minutes. Do you bring both Cat and Mitch off and bring in Hukporti or Yabu to play the 5? You're playing Yabu at the 5 and then you bring in Deuce or something. Though I think there are questions though and trade-offs, whereas if you stagger Mitch and Cat, you can probably preserve their legs a bit more. Unless you're going to go heavy with Hukporti or Yabu at the 5, which I don't think they want to do a ton of when Mitch and Cat are both healthy. So like those to me are more reasons why I'd be a little bit skeptical about the Mitch starting, but I don't know how much, especially if it's just one position. I don't know how much like that disrupts the rhythm because in reality, all of these lineups should be playing a lot together and getting comfortable with each other.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just like I guess my bias is that Mitch should be on a bit minutes restriction. He's going to miss time. We already know he's going to miss time because he always misses time. He's probably not going to play back to backs. I think making him the starter feels odd given those kind of known restrictions, but I do agree with your larger point where it's like if you're going to mix and match a bunch anyway, maybe that's not as big of a deal. Whereas it was a bigger deal for a coach like Tibbs, right? Because we knew kind of like what the rotations would look like because there was so set in stone. And there was just not a lot of variation in what you were using. So I think that's definitely a fair point. All right. Well, ultimately, you know what would you say is what 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 defines a successful season for you? Like, is it championship or bust this year, or do you think that you can come short of that and it still be viewed as like, you know what, this season was still successful, even though we did not ultimately reach the kind of end goal that we had for ourselves?
Man, after one Knicks broke so many hearts yesterday, you want to talk about what would consider another Knicks breaking all these New Yorker hearts um,
Man,
the
too
day
soon.
after? Too soon? Um, I don't know. I mean, everything's on the table. I think that so it's not championship or bust. I'll say that. I don't think the Knicks are a better team than Oklahoma City. I don't think they are as good as Oklahoma City. We talked about this, right? We took them to get back to close to 68 games. They should be better. Chet and Jay Will are at the age where we'd expect them to. Certainly, Chet. He looks like the kind of guy that could take the kind of leap that Mobley did, and I think offensively he's already more talented. It's not championship, and again, if they go to the championship and lose to Nikola Jokic, who will be the best player on the floor with a pretty good roster and championship experience, even guys like Gordon, there's no shame in that to me. And then if they make the finals and lose to some weird team like LA, that would be like that Heat year, right? Where it's like, they won a playoff series, they got farther than they had, but you felt like you left money on the table. Disappointment, I don't know. But it's not championship or bust. Is it finals or bust? That is a more interesting question, and it definitely
Okay, well let's go with that. Is it finals or bust?
it depends on how they. Assuming it's Cleveland they face, it depends on how and why they lose. Because I think they're very evenly matched with Cleveland, and I think Cleveland did have the injury issues. There is a world in which Donovan Mitchell gets hot. I know we've shit on his playoff career, but he has. It's not like he's never had good performances in the playoffs. There's a world in which with a healthy Garland, they're causing matchups for the Knicks on the perimeter. Atkinson is just coaching at a high level. They're shooting the shit out of the ball. If you go 7 games with them and just lose a close series, would I consider the season a disappointment? No. Pretty much every other outcome than that, especially a one where they don't look super competitive with the Cavs. Like if they lose the Cavs series the same way they lost the Pacers series, even without the heartbreak in game one, it was 6 games. And in game 6, you weren't really competitive. That would be a disappointment. If they lose, but if they lose a close 7-game series with the Cavs that goes down to the wire, I wouldn't consider that a failure. Pretty much every other non-finals outcome I would, or a disappointment. Sorry, I shouldn't say failure.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is I would I would consider that a failure, but you might still feel better about the team. Like you might still feel like okay, so like you mentioned, how these things occur is part of how we evaluate this, right? So like, let's say you go to the finals, but then you lose to like Denver, for example. Obviously, Jokic is amazing. I think we're a really bad matchup for them. And so if we got to the finals and we played Denver, I would be pretty annoyed if like we lost that series. Like I would consider that a failure. Whereas if you lost to OKC, who I think is, I mean, I think they're a kryptonite for us. Like that would not bother me to the same degree. I mean, I would be annoyed because if you go to the finals and you lose, obviously you're gonna be fucking annoyed. But at least I would feel like, okay, well, you know, this is just what it is. Like you're there's a team in the West that exists that is a really, really bad matchup for us. And ultimately, I don't know, you know, I can at least feel okay about, well, obviously you don't want to lose to anybody, but it makes sense why we lost the series. If they lose in the conference finals to Cleveland and it's a competitive series, 7 games and blah blah blah, um, okay, like I personally think that's a failure. But I may also come away from that series being like, oh wow, we defended their guards really well, and maybe there are certain things, maybe the things that loses that series are things that,
Yeah, like Struce going off or just hot
yeah,
shooting
like
from
maybe
their
they're just
bench.
things that I feel okay, but oh, you know what? Actually, we defended their guards really well, and we kept them out of the paint consistently, and um, wow, okay, now moving forward, like, maybe I feel better about our ability to be able to at least contain SGA to some degree or something like that. Like in that scenario, despite it being a failure, I might just be like, okay, well, it's a failure, but I feel better about this team long
Silver
term, moving
linings,
forward,
right?
whatever. Sorry, say it again.
Silver linings.
Yeah, silver linings. Um, but yeah, for me, I would say I think it's finals or bust effectively. Like I think you have to get to the finals. And I think that's an okay standard to have because the Knicks are telling you that's the standard they have. They fired their coach after making the conference finals and losing in 6 games. They have maxed out their credit card, right? Like they have punted all the picks. They have built this team up to the limit in terms of as far as they're able to spend up to the second apron. Like they are pot committed in every possible way that you can be pot committed. Um, I think it's fair to hold them to that standard. I think we should hold them to that standard. They should be held to that standard. That's the reality. And also the Eastern Conference is more open than it's been maybe more open than it's been in years, maybe more open than it will be for years, for all we know. You have to capitalize on those opportunities because they don't come along every year. I mean, the Knicks
I
made the
mean,
finals in '94, and the next year Michael Jordan returns, and you're like, oh, well, that sucks. Guess we missed our shot. Like, things can change so fast in the NBA. You got to capitalize when those opportunities come about. So, and that's why I feel so like that's why I feel like that 2023-24 season was really like a missed opportunity for us. And obviously, that was less self inflicted and more injuries suck, right? Like, because I did feel like that team matched up really well against Boston. And, would they have beaten Dallas in the finals? I have no idea. Would they beat Boston? I don't know. But to not have the chance sucks. That's what really sucks. And
and then
hopefully
there
this
was the
group
year
is held.
before too. We felt like Miami was a good draw, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to rehash, but that was a very frustrating series too because if they beat Miami, Miami went on to beat Boston, so Boston was much more vulnerable than we thought, and not a good matchup for us still at that point. But you never know once you get there, right? And then Denver won. That's the only time they've made the finals, right? So, like I said, I don't think we're quite as bad a matchup for Denver then as we are now. No, I think was that the season where we just beat the shit out of them? We've beaten
No.
them pretty consistently for a while.
Yeah, no, that year we did beat them both times, but we didn't like absolutely destroy
But
them.
one time was without Mitch and Hartenstein. I think we
Correct.
started Sims and beat them after like
Yeah.
Jokic had killed us for years. So
Yeah.
yeah, but to
Well,
your
the
point,
weirdest thing was always just that, like, for whatever reason, Jericho Sims would be like the worst defender in 95% of games, and then he would play Jokic, and he was just like, "Yeah, no, this is easy for me. Just Nikola Jokic, no problem."
yeah. But to your point, yeah, like all of those feel like missed opportunities. This one might even feel less so because this is probably the best Western Conference Finals team we've seen since in a while. I'll put it like that. So yeah, I think you're 100% right that you can't just pass up opportunities. I think this gets overstated, but yeah, it is a fact that there's a guy who's 20 years old and might already be a top 5 player in the NBA, getting better at an exponential rate. Even do I think that means that no other team will win again? No, we've talked about the salary cap and all the restrictions and how it's tough to like just go top heavy. But if he is as good as he could be, if he ends up being Michael Jordan level, which the fact that I'm saying that and it's not crazy says something about something. That's so. I think you're definitely correct. You definitely can't waste opportunities.
Yeah. Um. So let's do this. What are your expectations for Jalen Brunson this year? So what I mean by that is, let's just do this. Does Jalen Brunson make first team All NBA this season?
It's positionless now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think, and it's a 65 games thing. I think Giannis hits that. I think Jokic hits that. So those guys are in. I think SGA hits that. He's in. There's no Tatum who made it last year, right? Or was it 2 years ago he made it over Brunson, and that's where we weren't happy about that. So Jokic, Giannis, Luka, SGA. That's what's all about that fifth. I think Wemby gets that fifth spot this year, so I'm going to say no. I think Wemby gets the fifth spot, even if his team isn't great. I think he's going to be absurd. I think, but there's a decent chance. I think if the Cavs get the number 1 seed, Mitchell once again will get prioritized over Brunson. I think there might even be splitting some of the votes with Cat if they both have really good years. So I'm going to say no, but I do think he's solidly in at second.
Um. Yeah. I think he makes it. Um. I feel like if the Knicks are as good as you think they are going to be, I think it's impossible for him not to make it. Really, like I think it's impossible for him not to be first team if they're as good as you think they will be, because he'll get rewarded for that. He will get rewarded for the team being that successful.
Or him and
Um,
Cat will both make second, right? And then maybe even
I but
Bridges gets an
I just
honorable
think
mention.
you're going to get you're going to get somebody that makes the top. Like Donovan Mitchell did not. I mean, he had probably one of his
Wait,
lesser individual years over the last 4 or 5 years, and he made first team All NBA for the first time because the team won 64 games. Like the marquee guy is going to get rewarded when you win a shit ton, and I
I
think
think there are
Brunson would
people
get
who see
rewarded for
them
that,
as
especially
pro
because
margaritas. That's I guess my point.
I think people have a lot more confidence slash respect for Brunson than Cat in the media anyway. I don't know. That's just how it comes across to me. Um, but yeah, I don't know. What is a successful year? Like I will say this. I think it's possible, and I would even argue that maybe a truly what would be the healthiest sign, right, for like the Knicks in a lot of ways. I truly believe that Brunson scoring less, maybe even assisting less, would be a good sign for the Knicks, because I think that probably means other guys are benefiting from that, or other guys are producing so that we're less reliant on Jalen Brunson. So I almost want to say the biggest kind of, or one of the bigger indicators of success for the Knicks this year is Brunson's averages going down.
I would push back a little bit because I think if you get him off ball, one of the benefits is so if his averages go down, I think his efficiency explodes. Because what that means is he's getting more catch and shoot attempts. Let's not forget his average already went down last year to 26 points. As ball dominant as he was still very efficient. So if he's trading in some of those inefficient late clock midi pull ups that he missed for catch and shoot threes, I'm not convinced his scoring average goes down. His assists might, and he might go back to 25 and 7, which might be his optimal thing. But it's less about a statistical metric for me. At this point, I expect the guy to be at about 60 true shooting. I think if they really make the off-ball improvements, he'll crest that and maybe have his most efficient season ever. A successful season to me is continued effort on defense. I think for the most part, he often fought off ball. He fought for position when guys would try to post him up. You can call it flopping. He does force a good amount of offensive fouls. On offense, I think just getting into the sets quickly, that's a huge thing. I don't know how much of that was Tibbs or how much was him, but they need to how many times were close to an 8-second violation or actually called for one. That has just a tremendous ripple effect on the offense. And moving without the ball, I think that's the key thing, right? When you say he's going to be off ball, is he going to be spacing? Or I'm not asking him to be Steph Curry or JJ Redick, but I am asking him to do relocation things. Can he be Emmanuel quickly off the ball? I think that's very reasonable when he doesn't have it. So it's more process oriented than any kind of numbers. If there's numbers, I expect him to get 25 plus, 5 plus assists, and 60 true shooting. That would be, and I don't think that's some crazy number for him. Even if his scoring ticks down, I think the more his scoring goes down, I think the more the efficiency will go up. Unless, of course, the other possibility you didn't mention is that he just has a bad year, or they try to get other guys involved, it doesn't work, and the offense just doesn't work around him, and he can't adapt. I'm less convinced that that's the thing. So it's more about playing faster, moving without the ball when you don't have it, which I think he's shown in the rare times he's gotten to. And I think the rest will take care of himself. The leadership, the shot making, the intellect, really, that gets underrated because people call him a ball hog. We already know all that is there. So a few of those stylistic tweaks, and I'm not too worried about him. And I'm also not worried if he makes first team All NBA as a result.
Yeah. I guess where I'm like a little bit just. I think if he's off ball more, he's just going to score less. I think it's very unlikely that he could carry the volume he has, or score at the same volume he has if he's off ball. To the degree it seems like Mike Brown is at least saying he would kind of like him to get off the ball. Now, if that actually carries over, I don't know. Maybe it won't, and maybe his on ball off ball splits are kind of a lot more similar to last year than we maybe initially projected. Do you think Cat will take over 6 threes per game this year?
What did he take last year? 5?
I would have to look it up. I want to say 4 or something. How about this? Do you think he'll take over 5 threes per game this year?
Yeah, I mean, those are rookie numbers. You got to pump those numbers up.
5.5. How about that? 5.5.
I'd take over 6. If they're going to play, I mean, they're going to emphasize in transition. You talked about it, right? If they're still getting used to playing fast, if they don't have the best athletes, the
He took
easiest
4.7 last year. He hasn't averaged over 6 since the 2020-2021 season. And he's at 4.3 per game for his career, though that's way down by his first 3 years. Over the last 7 seasons, he is averaging 5.4 threes per game. So 5.5. You're going over.
Yeah, I'm going over. I think they're going to play faster. He got 4.7 on one of the slowest teams in the league. Maybe they'll still be that in terms of just a raw possession count. I think, yeah, as they're getting used to playing faster, the easiest read and the best read often is going to be that cat trailer three, which we know we can hit pretty efficiently. Um, if they're having Bridges do more, Cat will probably get the opportunity to space more. I think they're going to try to get him more looks from three. I think it's going to be prioritized in the offense more than it was under Tibbs. And then if the ball is moving, if there's more drive and kick, and he's not, kind of in the paint, um, he probably will be getting more open looks. So I would take the over on that. 6 is probably what I would guess.
I'll go under. I do think teams will consistently scheme to take away the three. I feel that if he plays next to a big for the majority of his time, it makes it harder to generate threes for him. Um, yeah, that's why I think under. They can get him more in transition. I think there are ways to get him more even in the half court. But I do think the fact that he's not like a great volume or movement shooter, rather, and the fact that his release is not, I wouldn't say it's a slow release, but I'm not going to say it's like a quick trigger release. He's also not a great off the dribble kind of creator shooter. Randall obviously is nowhere near the shooter that Cat is, but he could get his volume up in a way that Cat can't because he's comfortable, or more comfortable, I should say, creating his own shot off the dribble, especially in in an ISO situation or something. So, I'll go under 6, but I will also say I think the Knicks are going to average more than 43s per game. I don't know where you are on that. Last year, I think there were only 4 teams that averaged over 43s per
I
game.
think they averaged 40 for the preseason, didn't they?
They averaged definitely over 40 in the preseason.
Yeah, and Brown said their
But they
goal
also
was
shot like crap from 3 in the preseason. Again,
yeah. But you're also playing more players that aren't shooters, right? So yeah, I mean, I think you brought it up, right? How much of that poor 3-point shooting is because you're taking shots in different scenarios that maybe you wouldn't have before, or is it just poor preseason shooting? If the goal is 50, yeah, I think they'll get to 43s. That also tells me they are going to go 5 out at least a good amount. Brown has played it, and we've quibbled so much about the starting lineup. Ultimately, that's all we care about, right? It wasn't just that Tibbs started Hart. It's that Hart. I mean, they played that lineup an insane amount, and they never played a 5-out lineup. Another reason I'm optimistic on Cat's threes because he should get more looks with a lot of guards. Even Deuce will have opportunities to attack a little bit more. I mean, he'll be the 5th option, so I'm not saying Deuce is going to turn into some high volume driver, but that's what 5-out does, right? It puts everyone in one-on-one, and if people help, Cat's going to get open threes, and he's going to be asked to take them. I think that, yeah, and if you look at the players they added, Yabusele's not some high volume shooter, but he can get him up from above the arc. Clarkson is a gunner, right? To the extent he plays, he's probably going to shoot more. I don't know if Deuce will take another volume leap, but I think if he's playing off ball more, then he absolutely will and should, because he's an excellent catch and shoot player. I think you'll see an uptick in efficiency. And then, yeah, I mean, if you're even, I'll even say this, and maybe this is, I could be proven wrong on this. Even if Mitch is the one who starts, or Hukporty does, and you're going double big, I would argue Mitch starting generates more 3-point attempts than Hart would. One, the guy's just going to get you more possessions per game, like 3 to 4 at least.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
2, they're going to have to crash the glass. So even if they're tip outs or loose balls, if the Knicks manage to get the ball out of a scramble and they can kick it out, those will result in open threes. So you're trading a guy who is, making it difficult to drive and kick threes because teams would put a center on him. You're replacing him with a guy who I think can generate more threes, or a guy like Deuce who just shoots more, or a guy like Yabusele who's a more efficient shooter. you're taking a lot. I'm not saying replacing him, but you're taking a lot of those minutes and shifting it to more shooting friendly lineups. In addition to the pace, in addition to the emphasis, yeah, I think that's very much within reason.
Yeah. Um, where do the Knicks finish in offensive rating this season?
They were sixth last year, right?
Fifth.
Fifth. um, I think Denver and Cleveland will finish top two. I'm trying to think of who else in the West. Golden State's weird.
OKC.
Did they finish top two last year?
They were top 5. I think they were above. They were above the Knicks.
I think top. I think I'll say fourth. Then I think the other two I'm less convinced on then because I do think Oklahoma City's going to get better. They'll get more. Chet barely played, and I do think he's going to blow up this year. I think Chet Holmgren will make the All Star game, and I also think Williams and obviously SJ will. So I'll take OKC. Cleveland was bonkers in the regular season last year, so until proven otherwise, I can't pick the Knicks to finish above them. And then Denver is reloaded and has the best offensive player in basketball. But other than that, yeah, I think fourth would be my prediction.
I think the Knicks will finish second in offensive rating. I think that I'm not convinced Cleveland is actually as good at shooting as they were last year. I feel like they might have just had a hot year from three.
They also lost Ty Jerome and Strus is hurt. So
yep, that's also there. Garland's out to start the year, so that's part of it. I think that they will be still really good offensively and probably fundamentally not much of a difference in how good they are as a team, but I do think their shooting will fall off a little bit and that they will, you know, therefore not be as good offensively as they were last season. So that's that. I I think the Knicks finish second, and I think they have a chance to finish first. They definitely have a
behind
chance to
Oklahoma
finish
City.
first. I think they should finish offensively ahead of Oklahoma City.
So you're picking Denver number one, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think Denver now with obviously you have Jokic, which has always been great for them because Jokic is pretty good at the basketball. But they, I think just that they actually got real shooters now in terms of, you have you got Cam Johnson instead of Michael Porter Jr. Tim Hardaway Jr. is another volume 3-point shooter guy that I think, again, playing off of a guy like Jokic will be really good for him. There's a chance that you get a leap from a guy like Christian Brown or Jalen Pickett or Peyton Watson. So I'm going to go
Brown,
with them as
the
number.
last time he was really good was in Denver too, right? So we know he fits in well. I mean, we'll see what the new
Right.
coach does with him, but he's comfortable obviously with Jokic. So
Yeah, so I'll go with that. Do you do you think that the Knicks will be better defensively this year or worse? They finished 13th in defensive rating last season.
who's the Knicks' best defensive player? Actually, that's a tough one.
I think it's OG, but Mitch is more impactful because centers are more impactful.
I think that is an interesting question because my first instinct was, well, you're probably going to get more than 30 games or whatever Mitch played, and probably he should average more minutes. On the other hand, I am guessing that if I had to take the over-under on whatever OG, I think OG played 74 games last year. I don't think that happens again. I think they load manage him more. I think you start Deuce, there's some incremental gains there, and Hart should also improve himself as a defender if he's not playing 40 minutes a night and just mentally exhausted. But they've added, Clarkson. Is Clarkson going to be meaningfully worse than Payne? I mean, Payne tried. I don't think that's a big deal one way or the other. Yabusele, I think they should be 13th is higher than I think they were, but the East is even worse this year. And there aren't a lot of good offensive teams in the East. Atlanta's spacing is a little weird, but they have talent, right? But Atlanta might be the next best offensive team. Detroit is not going to exploit us offensively, really. Orlando, we've talked about kind of their struggles, right? To the extent that Orlando might beat the Knicks, it would probably be pummeling us on the glass on a night where maybe Mitch sits and we can't get anything going on offense. So looking at just how weak their schedule is, and there aren't that many great offensive teams, I think that they're going to play a bunch. I think, yeah, they can beat 13th. Do I think they'll be better? They had new acquisitions who should also just be more comfortable in their roles. Not just Bridges, who I think will look like maybe not the guy who made first team All NBA, but the kind of defender we were expecting him to be, impactful off ball, can take the point of attack at times, doesn't biff as much. I think Hart, OG, and Mikal, even when they play together, will probably be on the same page more often in year two. I think Cat will be more on the same page, especially if you're not playing strictly drop with him, but you're switching him a little bit more. I think just that comfort level also should have some benefits. So I'll say they're better this year. I think that 13th is higher than they probably were last year, so wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't have surprised me if they finished worse than 13th, even as a better defensive team, if that makes sense. But I also think the East just there just aren't that many good offensive teams they're gonna have to face night in and night out.
Yeah, no, I think they'll finish like I'll say 11th. I know I'm probably tempting fate here. I think Mitch will play more games than he did last year, and I also suspect that they'll get better defensive output from Mikal Bridges, which will be significant. I also think Deuce McBride will play more consistently, which will also help them defensively.
And I think we
So
both think Hart will be better off the bench. Like, he should be good defensively in a
yeah,
different role
Hart.
too.
I think Hart will have a. I think we'll remember why we loved Josh Hart when he first got here, or maybe not us. I think we've both kind of felt kind of bad for him in terms of how it worked out in some ways, right? With Tibbs kind of running him so much that he became public enemy number one in a lot of people's eyes. Um, but yeah, I think if he comes off the bench, he should be a lot better overall. And also just the idea, right, of yeah, maybe he still is not locked in and he's still kind of space cadetting on defense, but if he's just doing that more against bench units, it's less costly than when you do that against starting opposition. So that in and of itself should help. And I'll also say people forget we played a shit ton of minutes last year with Precious on the floor, and Precious was not good. And I suspect that we will get better. We'll get better play, defensive play from Huck Forty. I would say we get better offensive play from Huck 42 than Precious, but yeah, I think we'll get better defensive play from him. And I am I feel pretty good about this team being better defensively on aggregate than they were last year. So yeah, I'll say they finished 11th or 12th. Okay, final thing. Final thing. How many games do the Knicks win? And what seed? And do you think that they win the championship?
I said 60 was in play on the pod. I think you've talked me out of some of that optimism. So I'm going to go with, especially with the Mitch thing, I'm going to go with 55 wins. I still think they beat the over. I do think 60 is in play. I'm going to go with 55 wins. I think they finish as the 2 seed, especially if, Cleveland's also dealing with their own injuries. But they're, in year 2 with their coach, probably has a little bit of a continuity edge. So they finish at this 2 seed. Do they win the championship? No, I think they fall, whether they face Oklahoma City or it's tough, man. Like I know we match up really well with Denver, but the playoffs are a different game, and and we're facing a champion and a multi-time MVP who's surrounded with really good pieces or complementary pieces. I think that I wouldn't say yes to that question, but I think 55. I'll say 55, 56 wins. That's where I'm at. And second seed.
And lose in the finals.
Yes, losing the final. Sorry.
I think the Knicks will win 53 games. I think they will start off much slower than people think, and I think they will close strong after really picking it up midway through the season. They will be the 2 seed. They will win the East, and then they will defeat the Nuggets in the finals because Nikola Jokic will do us a solid and take out OKC in the Western Conference playoffs. And we own Nikola Jokic because he's actually not that good at the sport. And Mitchell Robinson owns him, and Kat owns him, and OG owns him. And that will be enough. That will be enough, and we will win the championship.
Heard it
In
here
6
first.
games. In 6 games.
Knicks in 6.
Knicks in 6. That's my prediction.
So that's why we
Okay.
wouldn't go for the 1 seed, so we don't have home court advantage in the finals, so
we
can
can win.
game
Yeah.
6 at MSG. That makes sense.
Yeah. And actually before the game, Jalen Brunson will be questionable, and then he'll walk out at the last second.
And then play 4 minutes, but Cat will have 36 points and 19. You'd have to do that
Right.
with Cat, actually. Cat would have to.
Yeah. Cat will play 4 minutes, and he'll inspire everybody so much that we win by like 20, and it'll be great. All right. Thank you to everybody for listening. Stacy, let people know they can find you and plug anything you'd like to plug.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but in addition to everything else in the Strickland, Shax from the site Shax_NBA on Twitter has created like some really great content. He did a huge, like very meticulous breakdown. I don't know how anyone could have the time for it, of the Knicks' offensive tendencies, what their plays are. So if you want to go into the season kind of understanding what some of the things they're going to try, how the offense might look different, it's also just really well done work. So kudos to Shax, and I highly recommend people checking it
out. Yes, I would echo that. Shax definitely has created something that is extensive and very, very informative. So definitely check that out. I'll also say check out the work that Strickland podcasts, articles, Prez and Drew had something drop today regarding Giannis. So definitely give that a read. Aside from that, I have nothing. So thank you to our sponsor, FanDuel. And I'll see everybody on Wednesday, maybe for the post game, but definitely on Friday. Oh, yeah. Final thing. Are the Knicks going to beat the Cavs on Wednesday?
out. I'm assuming Mitch is out, so no.
Okay. I'm just going to say the vibes carry us and we win. All right. Anyway, that's our show for today. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week, and I'll see you on Friday. Peace.